I am sitting in my Manhattan penthouse, gazing out at Central Park through floor-to-ceiling windows. My phone buzzes for the 47th time this week. The screen reads, "Mom." I decline the call and place it face down on my marble countertop. 9 years ago, she told me I would be back begging within a month. She was wrong. I am Kristen Walsh, and this is how my parents' worst nightmare became my greatest triumph. Before I tell you how a 17-year-old girl with nothing but a camera and a dream proved her parents wrong, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about turning your pain into power. Now let me take you back to the night that changed everything. My father, Dr. Richard Walsh, was one of Boston's most respected cardiologists, earning $500,000 annually. My mother, Margaret Walsh, was a partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, bringing in another $400,000 each year. We lived in a stunning Victorian home in Beacon Hill, worth $2.5 million. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American success story. But perfection came with a price. My parents had my entire life mapped out before I could even walk. Harvard pre-med followed by medical school, then a prestigious residency. I would become a doctor just like my father. There was no room for deviation, no space for dreams that did not fit their vision. My love for photography began when I was 12 years old. I found my grandfather's old camera in the attic, a vintage Nikon that still worked beautifully. While other kids played video games, I spent hours learning about aperture shutter speed and composition. I photographed everything: the changing seasons in our neighborhood, candid moments of my classmates, the intricate details of everyday objects that others overlooked. My parents initially dismissed it as a phase, a cute hobby that would eventually fade as I got older and more serious about my studies. They were wrong. The older I got, the more passionate I became about capturing the world through my lens. By 16, I had developed a distinct style that my high school art teacher said showed real promise. That is when the trouble started. During my junior year, I announced that I wanted to attend the Rhode Island School of Design instead of Harvard. The reaction was immediate and explosive. My father's face turned red as he slammed his medical journal down on the kitchen table. My mother set down her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. "Photography is not a real career, Kristen," my mother said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It is a hobby, a distraction. You cannot build a life on taking pictures." My father was more direct. "You are throwing away every advantage we have given you. Do you know how many kids would kill for the opportunities you have? Harvard is not just a school, it is a guarantee of success." But I could not make them understand. When I looked through my camera, I felt alive in a way that studying anatomy or chemistry never made me feel. I saw beauty and story in every frame. This was not just what I wanted to do, it was who I was. The next few months were a war zone. My parents cut off my allowance and confiscated my camera equipment. They scheduled extra tutoring sessions to keep me focused on my grades. Every conversation became a battlefield where they tried to convince me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I responded by getting a part-time job at a local photography studio. I worked weekends and evenings learning from the owner while saving every penny I earned. I bought a used camera with my wages and continued practicing in secret. My grades remained excellent, but my heart was not in my studies. The breaking point came 3 months after graduation. I had secretly applied to RISD and been accepted with a partial scholarship. I had been planning to tell my parents for weeks, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during what I thought would be a celebratory dinner for my graduation. "We have wonderful news," my father announced as we sat down to eat. "I spoke with Dean Morrison at Harvard Medical School. Even though you missed the regular application deadline, he is willing to consider a late application given our family connection." My stomach dropped. This was their grand plan. They had been working behind the scenes to secure my future without consulting me. I looked at their expectant faces and realized this was my last chance to take control of my own life. "I am not going to medical school," I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My father's expression went from confusion to anger in seconds. "What did you just say?" he asked. "I said I am not going to medical school. I was accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design with a scholarship. I am going to study photography." What happened next changed everything. My mother laughed, but it was not a happy sound. It was bitter and cruel. "You think you know better than us. You think your little hobby is going to pay for food and rent and health insurance." My father stood up his chair, scraping against the hardwood floor. "Choose medical school or get out of this house." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. Surely he could not be serious. These were the people who had raised me, who had told me they loved me every day of my life. They would not really kick me out for following my dreams. "You cannot be serious," I whispered. "I have never been more serious about anything in my life," he replied. "Pack your bags. You have until tomorrow morning." I looked at my mother, hoping for some sign of support, some indication that she would intervene. Instead, she picked up her wine glass and took a sip. "Fine," she said coldly. "Pack your bags. You have until tomorrow morning." I felt like I was drowning. These were not my parents speaking. These were strangers wearing their faces. I tried one more time, my voice breaking as I spoke. "I am still your daughter. Please do not do this." My mother's response cut deeper than any physical blow could have. No daughter of mine would be this selfish and stupid. I barely slept that night. I kept expecting one of them to knock on my door to apologize and take back their ultimatum. But morning came without any reprieve. I packed everything that mattered to me into 2 large suitcases, my clothes, my camera equipment, and $847 I had saved from working at the photography studio. I found my parents in the kitchen, calmly eating breakfast and reading their respective newspapers as if it were any other Tuesday morning. They did not look at me as I wheeled my suitcases to the front door. I stood there for a long moment, hoping for some last-minute change of heart. "Please," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "just give me one more chance. Maybe we can find a compromise." My mother looked up from her newspaper and gave me a smile that still haunts me to this day. It was not warm or loving. It was smug and satisfied. "You will be back begging in a month when reality hits. Trust me, sweetheart, the real world is not going to be as kind to you as we have been." My father stood up and walked to the front door. He opened it wide and gestured for me to leave. "When you are ready to stop this nonsense and grow up, you can call us." I picked up my suitcases and walked toward the door. As I stepped onto the front porch, I turned back one more time. "I love you both. I hope someday you will understand." My father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Love is not enough when you are being foolish." Then he closed the door. I heard the deadbolt turn with a finality that echoed through my chest. I stood on that porch for 10 minutes, staring at the door I had walked through thousands of times. Part of me expected it to open, expected them to run out and tell me they had made a terrible mistake, but it never opened. My best friend Sarah picked me up an hour later. Her family graciously let me sleep on their living room couch while I figured out my next move. But even Sarah, who had been supportive of my photography dreams throughout high school, started questioning my decision after the first week. "Maybe you should just call them," she suggested one evening as we sat in her bedroom. "I mean, it is Harvard Medical School. That is like winning the lottery." I worked 3 part-time jobs to support myself, waitressing at a diner during breakfast shifts, cleaning offices in the evening, and stocking shelves at a convenience store on weekends. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches to save money. Every penny I earned went toward basic survival. The worst part was not the physical hardship, though. The worst part was the silence. I called home twice during my first month away. Both times the phone rang and rang until the answering machine picked up. I left tearful messages apologizing and asking them to please just talk to me. No one ever called back. I sent an email 3 weeks after leaving home. I poured my heart out, explaining how sorry I was for disappointing them and how much I missed them. I checked my inbox obsessively for days, but no reply ever came. It was as if I had never existed. Exactly 1 month after they kicked me out, I sat on Sarah's front steps and cried until I could not breathe. My mother's words echoed in my head, "You will be back begging in a month." Part of me wanted to prove her right. Part of me wanted to call and surrender to accept whatever terms they offered just to have my family back. But I did not call. On day 32, I saw a small advertisement in the local newspaper, "Photography assistant wanted. Experience preferred, but will train the right candidate." I had nothing to lose. Marcus Rodriguez owned a small wedding photography business in South Boston. He was in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that reminded me of my grandfather. When I showed him my portfolio of amateur work, he studied each image carefully. "You have a good eye," he said finally, "but you have a lot to learn about running a business. Are you willing to start at the bottom and work your way up?" The salary he offered was barely above minimum wage, but it came with something more valuable than money opportunity. I said yes immediately. Marcus became the mentor my parents never allowed me to have. He taught me about lighting composition and client relations. More importantly, he taught me about resilience and the value of pursuing something you genuinely love. I rented a tiny 400 square foot apartment in South End for $800 a month. It was smaller than my childhood bedroom, but it was mine. I had no furniture except a mattress on the floor and a card table I used for editing photos. But I had never felt more free. I also made a difficult decision. I blocked my parents' phone numbers and deleted all my social media accounts. I needed to focus completely on building my new life without the distraction of hoping they would change their minds. The first 3 years were a masterclass in determination. I worked 70-hour weeks assisting Marcus on wedding shoots while learning every aspect of the business. I watched YouTube tutorials late into the night, teaching myself Photoshop and Lightroom. I offered to photograph local businesses for free, building a portfolio and gaining experience. I lived like a monk. Every dollar I earned either went toward rent and basic necessities or was saved for better camera equipment. I bought used gear whenever possible and learned to repair my own equipment when it broke. While other people my age were going to bars and dating, I was studying photography magazines and practicing my craft. By my second year working with Marcus, I had proven myself valuable enough to earn a raise and start taking on smaller wedding jobs as a secondary photographer. By my third year, Marcus was trusting me to handle some clients on my own. When Marcus decided to retire at the end of my third year, he made an offer that changed my trajectory completely. He would introduce me to his entire client base if I agreed to take over his studio lease and continue operating under his established business name until I could build my own reputation. I was 21 years old and suddenly running my own photography business. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I renamed the business Walsh Photography, ironically keeping the family name that my parents had tried to force me to abandon. The breakthrough came during my 4th year in business. Through a referral, I was hired to photograph the wedding of Jennifer Morrison, daughter of the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. It was the most high-profile event I had ever shot, and I knew it could make or break my reputation. The wedding was held at a private estate on Martha's Vineyard. I spent weeks planning every shot, scouting locations, and preparing backup plans for various weather scenarios. On the day of the wedding, everything went perfectly. I captured moments that told the story of their love in a way that felt both intimate and artistic. 3 months later, I received a call that changed everything. The photos had been featured in Martha Stewart Weddings magazine. Suddenly, my phone was ringing constantly with inquiries from high-end clients across New England. By age 25, I was earning $150,000 annually. I bought my first real home, a beautiful condo in Back Bay with large windows that provided perfect natural light for editing. I had arrived, or so I thought. The next evolution in my career came through social media. I started posting my work on Instagram, and my following grew quickly. Wedding photographers from around the world began reaching out for advice and collaboration. Within 2 years, I had over 100,000 followers. That is when Vogue noticed me. A creative director at the magazine reached out after seeing my fashion-influenced wedding photography. They offered me a trial assignment, shooting a small fashion spread for their online platform. I accepted immediately, even though it meant temporarily stepping outside my comfort zone. The shoot was a success, leading to more fashion assignments. I found that my wedding photography background had given me skills that translated perfectly to fashion, the ability to work quickly, to make subjects feel comfortable, and to capture authentic moments, even in stage scenarios. Around this time, I also met Alex Thompson, a creative director at a prominent advertising agency. We connected at a photography exhibition, bonding over our shared appreciation for visual storytelling. What started as professional networking evolved into something deeper. Alex understood my ambition in a way that felt completely foreign to me. Having grown up with parents who saw my dreams as foolish, being with someone who not only supported but actively encouraged my career goals was revelatory. By age 28, my life looked nothing like what my parents had envisioned for me, and everything like what I had dreamed it could become. Vogue hired me as a contributing photographer, which meant regular assignments and a steady income that exceeded what most doctors earn. I moved to New York City and rented a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. My company, Walsh Visual Arts, expanded to include 8 employees. We handled everything from high-end weddings to commercial campaigns for major brands. When Forbes included me on their 30 under 30 list, I felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride for how far I had come from that scared 17-year-old with nothing but a camera and a dream. Sadness because the people who should have been most proud of my achievements were not part of my life to celebrate them. I used some of my success to buy a beautiful home in Florida for my maternal grandparents, the only family members who had supported my choice from the beginning. They had quietly sent me encouraging cards and small checks during my hardest years, never asking for anything in return except updates on my progress. My relationship with Alex deepened into something serious and committed. We talked about marriage and starting a family together. For the first time since leaving Boston, I felt like I had built not just a career, but a complete life. 9 years to the day after my parents kicked me out, I was preparing for New York Fashion Week when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled me to answer. "Kristen, please do not hang up." The voice was older, more fragile than I remembered, but unmistakably my mother's. I had not heard her speak my name in nearly a decade. My hands started shaking. "How did you get this number?" I asked. "I hired a private investigator." She admitted, her voice breaking. "We needed to find you." The conversation that followed shattered any remaining anger I had been holding on to, replacing it with a complicated mixture of vindication and heartbreak. My father had been diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer 6 months earlier. The prognosis was grim, maybe 6 months to live, possibly less. But that was not the only crisis they were facing. The medical bills had quickly exceeded their insurance coverage. My mother's law firm had closed during the recession, and she had been unable to find comparable employment. My father's medical practice had suffered as his health declined. They had been forced to sell the Beacon Hill house and were now living in a small apartment, having burned through their retirement savings. "We need help." My mother said the words clearly difficult for her to speak. "But more than that, we need you. We were wrong, Kristen. We were so wrong about everything." She explained that they had followed my career from a distance, reading every article about my success and seeing my work featured in magazines. They had watched me build exactly the kind of life they had insisted was impossible. "Your father wants to see you," she continued. "He needs to apologize. We both do. We lost our daughter because of our own fears and prejudices, and we have regretted it every single day since." I spent the next 2 weeks wrestling with emotions I had buried for years. Alex encouraged me to see them arguing that I would regret not taking the opportunity to reconcile while I still could. My grandparents agreed, reminding me that forgiveness was often more about freeing yourself than about absolving others. But I was not ready to simply pick up where we had left off. Too much had happened, too many years had passed, and too much pain had been endured on both sides. I flew to Boston on a cold December morning, 9 years and 3 months after I had last seen my parents. They were waiting for me in the lobby of their apartment building, both looking decades older than their actual ages. My father, once a commanding presence who filled every room he entered, now looked fragile and small. The cancer had stolen his robust health and confident demeanor. My mother, always impeccably dressed and perfectly composed, seemed diminished and uncertain. "You look beautiful," my father said, tears streaming down his face. "And successful. Everything we hoped you would become, just not in the way we expected." The conversation that followed was painful and necessary. They apologized repeatedly, acknowledging that their fears about my future had been projections of their own insecurities rather than realistic assessments of my potential. "I see now what real courage looks like," my father admitted. "You had it at 17, and we did not recognize it. We were so terrified of you failing that we could not see you were destined to succeed." My mother was equally remorseful. "You were braver than we ever were. We chose safe traditional paths because we were afraid of uncertainty, but you embraced uncertainty and turned it into something extraordinary." I did not offer them financial assistance, though I could have easily solved their immediate problems. Instead, I helped them navigate the healthcare system, connecting them with resources and specialists who could provide the best possible care within their means. Our reconciliation was gradual and conditional. I was willing to rebuild our relationship, but it would be on different terms. I was no longer the teenage daughter, desperate for their approval. I was an accomplished woman who had built her own life and her own family of choice. My father lived for 8 more months after our reunion. I visited regularly, and we had many long conversations about life, regret, and redemption. In his final weeks, he told me how proud he was of the woman I had become, and how sorry he was for nearly missing the opportunity to know her. He died on a quiet Tuesday morning in August with my mother and me at his bedside. His last words to me were, "Keep taking pictures. The world needs to see what you see." At his funeral, person after person approached me to share stories about how he had talked about my success in his final months. He had carried printed copies of magazine articles featuring my work in his wallet, showing them to anyone who would listen. The experience taught me that success is not about proving others wrong, though vindication can feel satisfying. Real success is about staying true to yourself, even when the people you love most try to convince you that you are making a mistake. My mother and I continued to rebuild our relationship slowly. She has come to understand that my path, while unconventional, led me to a life that is both professionally fulfilling and personally meaningful. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. Sometimes it is simply living well and keeping your heart open to the possibility of healing, even when that healing comes years later than you hoped it would. What would you do if your family kicked you out for following your dreams? Have you ever had to choose between pleasing your parents and being true to yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding your own path to success. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that it is never too late to pursue your dreams, even when the people who should support you most are the ones standing in your way. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your dreams are valid no matter what anyone else tells you. Keep believing in yourself, because sometimes you are the only one who will until you prove everyone else wrong.